I used to think a house was just wood and weather, a place the wind rehearsed its old lines. Then I learned how a house listens. It remembers the way footsteps fall. It keeps the scent of summers you swore you'd never forget, and the taste of winters that took too much. It tucks away laughter in the seams and keeps a ledger of every time you raised your voice when you meant to say, "I'm scared." Ours, mine now, was a narrow-boned place on a small town street where mail still came with the kind of stamps that leave your fingers sweet. I painted the porch rail the color of cream and planted herbs in chipped blue pots. If you walked past on a mild evening, you might think you saw a simple life. A woman with her book, a dog at her feet, a ring catching the last kind light of day. But pictures don't show what's underneath. And the underneath was where I lived for a long time. Daniel's jacket still hung in the hall, shoulders slumped into his absence. The dog bed still lay by the radiator, hollow as a boat. I still wore the ring because it was a sentence I had not finished. A small, round promise that said, "Keep going," and also how. And then one wet Thursday when grief had the texture of static and my skin couldn't bear one more symbol of permanence, I slipped the ring off and set it on the nightstand like you set down a hot cup you almost dropped. It was supposed to be. For a nap, a breath, a few hours of being no one's widow, no one's wife. I fell asleep without it, and I woke to a smooth circle of dust where it had been, and a space on my finger that felt like something had been erased. I blamed everything you can blame when you are trying not to blame yourself. I blamed the house, and the clutter and the fact that my hands had grown thinner. I emptied drawers onto the bed until fabric draped like waves. I swept the corners for the thin scream of metal against wood and sifted the vacuum canister onto a grocery bag, gray clouds and red crumbs and a glitter of old lint. I told myself it was fine, that it would show up when it wanted to be found. I said it out loud, and the room didn't believe me. 2 weeks is a long time to practice pretending. I learned how to keep my left hand still when I spoke to neighbors so their eyes would not flicker to the empty place. I learned how to wash dishes slowly so I wouldn't accuse the sink of swallowing what it knew I needed. At night I lay on my side and made a cradle of my palm, the way you protect a bruise you won't admit you touched. The house made its small noises, the water heater muttering to itself, the stairs cracking their knuckles, the maple outside, brushing one finger against the window like a thought you don't want to think. On the 14th night, the air felt swollen with rain that hadn't yet arrived. I turned off the lamp, and the room kept a little of its light the way a face keeps a little of its smile when the joke is already gone. That was when I heard it. Not a knock. Not the abrupt, awkward insistence of someone who doesn't know how to ask. A scratch and then another, measured, patient, low to the ground. It came from the front door, down the hall. The sound threaded the quiet and taught the quiet a new shape. I sat up, the bed a boat that tipped beneath me, and listened with everything I had, even the coward part. The scratching paused as if to be polite, and then started again, soft enough that I could have called it a trick of the house if I wanted to keep the night ordinary. I stood, felt the cool of the floor through my socks, and walked the hall that held so many versions of us. My mouth formed Daniel's name out of habit, and the syllables felt like coins I hadn't spent in months. When I reached the door, I knelt without opening it and pressed my ear to the wood. I could hear the weather now, a far-off hiss moving closer, the porch boards cooling as the heat went out of them. I said another name very quietly, like you talk to a sleeping thing you loved so well you still move aside for it. Scout. Our dog, the good one, the one we carried wrapped in a faded towel to a plot under the maple when the ground was hard and our throats were harder. The scratching stopped. There was a beat of nothing, the kind of pause you get when a story is deciding if it trusts you. Then something slid under the door, thin, bright, sure of itself, and tapped the hall runner with a sound like a letter opener setting down. It caught the weak spill of light from the kitchen night bulb and threw it back in a color I knew better than my own reflection. My wedding ring. It lay between my knees on the rug, a small shining mouth, and what pushed it through the gap was a paw. Not a hand, not a branch, not the bumbling curiosity of raccoon fingers. A paw. with its soft pads and tidy nails and the careful, practiced way a creature retrieves what it knows belongs to you. I could have yanked the door open. I could have flung it wide and said his name like a prayer and taken whatever answer the night had. Instead, I stayed where I was, because some griefs teach you to move slowly or not at all. I reached out and touched the ring with the back of a finger, as if it might be an illusion the heat of my skin could ruin. It was wet with rain I hadn't yet heard, and warm in the way metal is warm when it has been held. I whispered thank you, and didn't know who I meant. The house answered with a small shift in its ribs, a settling, the way a living thing sighs when it has done what it can. And then the scratching was gone, and the night pressed its ear back to the windows and listened to me breathing like I was the one who might vanish. I slid the ring onto my finger without thinking, and it found the old path, the soft notch against the knuckle, the half-moon it had etched into me over years. The fit made my stomach tilt. The wind came up and the first drops of rain began to tick the porch rail, a metronome for a different kind of hour. I stood, put my palm flat against the cool door, and felt on the other side the faintest answering, heat, as if something had leaned back just for a second, and then went to see about the rest of the night. Thus, I didn't sleep the rest of that night. The air in the house felt stretched thin, as if it had been asked to hold too much. Every sound had meaning now, the tick of cooling pipes, the whisper of the maple against the eaves, even the sigh of my own breath turning over. I kept staring at the door, waiting for the scratches to start again, waiting for proof that I hadn't imagined what I'd seen. Around 3, the rain stopped and left behind a silence that wasn't quite peace. I stood, turned on the porch light and peered through the glass pane. The steps shone dark with water. The yard was clean of footprints, no paw marks, no scatter of mud, nothing that said a living thing had stood there and reached under my door. Only the soft glisten of the boards, as if the night had come to wipe the evidence clean. Still, when I touched my ring, it was there, damp, heavy, solid. I whispered again, "Thank you," feeling foolish and fragile and wide awake. In the morning, sunlight crawled slow through the curtains. The world looked unchanged, ordinary to the point of insult. I boiled coffee, fed the quiet, and told myself to stop thinking like someone who'd been touched by ghosts. But grief once invited learns every entrance. That afternoon I found Scout's leash. I hadn't gone looking for it. I was cleaning a drawer of old scarves when it slid forward, the clasp shining like a wink. The leather was dry, but when I brought it to my nose, it still carried the faint, sharp scent of dog and rain, and something like home. I sat on the floor and cried into my hands until the house blurred around me. That night the scratching returned, softer, slower, like a heartbeat that didn't want to startle me. I didn't open the door. I only listened. I could almost hear breath between the strokes, patient, familiar, steady. And then a sound that nearly undid me, a single quiet whine. The sound a dog makes when it wants to come in from the cold. I pressed my palm against the wood and said, "Scout, is that you?" The silence that followed felt almost like an answer, the kind that trembles just beyond hearing. When I opened the door, the porch was empty again. But on the mat lay something new, a small muddy indentation. Not quite a paw print, not quite a smudge, just the ghost of weight, the suggestion of belonging. I knelt and traced its outline, and my ring pulsed warm against my skin, like a heartbeat trying to sync with something older. That was when I started dreaming. The same one every night. In it, I stood in a field the color of honey at dusk. The wind moved the tall grass in slow breaths. Ahead of me, a dark shape trotted away. Ears high, tail low, head turning just enough for me to see one eye watching back, making sure I followed. Always toward the same horizon, where a single tree stood against the last light. Always before I could reach it, the ground tilted, and I woke with the taste of dirt on my tongue and the echo of scratching in my chest. I told myself it was stress. I told myself I missed them both too much to separate dream from wish. But each morning, something else waited at the door. First a stick, then a torn bit of Daniel's old gardening glove, then a small, smooth stone that glittered faintly blue under the kitchen light. All of them laid carefully, precisely in the same spot where the ring had appeared. It didn't feel like a haunting. It felt like a memory being built in reverse. like someone or something was trying to teach me how to remember properly. By the 5th night, I'd stopped pretending it wasn't real. I sat cross-legged by the door before midnight, a candle flickering beside me. I whispered stories about the walks we used to take, about how Daniel would pretend to throw the ball twice before actually letting it go, about how Scout would always bring it back even if no one asked. The house felt like it was leaning closer to listen, and when I finally whispered, "You can come in," the scratching stopped altogether. The silence that followed was alive, thick, waiting. Then, just as I started to rise, something brushed against the other side of the door, a gentle weight pressing as if to rest its head. And through the wood, faint and impossible, I felt warmth. I kept my hand there until dawn. The next morning, the world was softer, the kind of quiet that follows a confession. Sunlight pooled in the hall, golden and forgiving. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel like the house was too big for me. The ring sat light on my hand, and I caught myself smiling at it foolishly, like it was a secret only I knew. I made coffee, left the door unlocked, and sat on the porch steps with my mug warming my palms. The yard smelled of wet earth, of the world rinsed clean. And right there on the last step where rainwater had collected in a shallow pool, I saw them. Paw prints. Small, steady, walking away from the door toward the old maple tree. 4 steps, then gone, like something had walked back into the earth that made it. I followed them anyway. The grass was soft, damp enough to cling to my slippers. Beneath the maple, the ground was uneven. I knew the shape of that earth. I dug it myself last winter when the air had cut like glass and my fingers had refused to feel. Scout's resting place. I knelt there now, brushing away leaves, tracing the outline of the stone I'd placed on top. A flat piece of river rock carved with his name. The letters uneven because I'd done them with a kitchen knife when I couldn't afford a real marker. The stone looked freshly washed, gleaming. Someone or something had cleared it of moss, and that's when I saw it. A small indentation in the dirt, right above where his chest would have been. A circle, neat and shallow, as if someone had pressed something there. The size of my ring. I touched it, the soil cool and faintly damp, and a tremor ran up my arm, sharp but not cruel. For a heartbeat, I swore I felt breath moving under the earth, slow and steady, like the house exhaling through the roots. That night, I dreamed again. The field, the honey-colored dusk. Only this time, when the dark shape turned to look back at me, there was someone beside it. Daniel. He didn't speak, didn't move closer. He only reached out, resting his hand on the dog's back. When I tried to step forward, the earth swallowed my feet. I woke with tears already on my face, my chest tight with a grief that felt new and ancient all at once. Days blurred after that. I stopped fighting the quiet. I began to talk to them both, out loud, over breakfast, while folding laundry, while locking the back gate. I didn't care if it made me sound mad. Sometimes I thought I heard answers in the creak of the floorboards, in the soft rattle of the curtain hooks. The world had become a conversation whispered through walls. But then things started changing. The ring began to hum. Not a sound exactly, but a vibration I could feel in my bones. It happened first when I stood near the front door, then near the maple, then anywhere I thought about loss. Once, while washing dishes, I dropped a glass because the hum turned sharp, like a warning. The pieces scattered across the sink, and when I reached to pick them up, a single drop of blood fell onto the metal. I watched it spread, bright and sure of itself, and I heard something, faint but clear. A low, rumbling whine. That night, I didn't wait for the scratching. I lit a candle, opened the door wide, and whispered into the rain, "You can come in now." The night breathed in. And then footsteps, not heavy, not human, slow, deliberate, just beyond the edge of sight. The candle flickered once, twice, and went out. In the darkness, I could hear claws on the wood circling me. My chest ached with the kind of fear that feels like love remembered too suddenly. When I turned toward the sound, I saw it. A shape made of shadow and breath standing in the doorway. The outline was wrong for a dog, but too gentle for anything else. It shimmered faintly like smoke lit by moonlight. And where the eyes should have been, 2 small golden sparks, warm and familiar. Scout. He stood there, silent, watching me. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. And then slowly the shape took a step closer. one paw on the threshold, the other hovering in the air between us. I knelt just as I had that first night, my hand trembling. When I reached out, my palm met warmth. Not fur, not flesh, but something that lived between the two. The sensation was like touching memory itself, fragile, pulsing, impossibly alive. He didn't vanish this time. He leaned into my hand, and behind him for a fleeting second I saw another outline. Broader, taller, Daniel, standing just beyond the light, and then, a voice I hadn't heard in so long I almost didn't recognize it. He whispered, "He brought you back what you were missing." The shape flickered. The paw pressed gently against my wrist. The ring pulsed once, hot against my skin, and I realized what he meant. It wasn't just the ring Scout had returned. It was me. I didn't tell anyone what I'd seen. You don't tell people that your dead dog walked into your house carrying forgiveness in his shadow. You don't say that your husband's voice rode the breath of a ghost. Some things break if you explain them too soon. I spent that whole morning trying to act normal, but the house knew. It had started to breathe with me. The air felt warmer, the rooms brighter somehow, as if someone had opened a window I hadn't noticed in years. Every time I walked past the front door, the ring would tingle faintly. A pulse under metal, steady and alive. It wasn't frightening anymore. It was like the house was saying, "We're not finished yet." Around noon, I went out to the maple tree again. The grass was still wet from a light drizzle, and I could smell the soil, rich, deep, full of memory. I brought the candle from the night before and placed it at the base of the stone. For a moment, I stood there, unsure what to do, and then I just spoke. I told Scout I was sorry I hadn't been there at the end, that I'd let Daniel take him to the vet alone because I couldn't bear to see the moment the light went out. I said I'd regretted that every day since. The air moved softly through the branches, whispering above me. When I looked down, the candle flame bent toward the earth as if bowing. That night, I dreamed differently. The field was still there, but this time I was already standing beside the maple tree from our yard, its branches alive and golden, stretching into that endless horizon. Scout sat at my feet, tail sweeping the grass. Daniel was standing a few steps away, watching. He smiled. An old, gentle smile, the one that said, "I understand." When I tried to walk to him, Scout moved between us, nudging me backward, almost playful. Then Daniel spoke, the sound soft as wind. "Not yet, love. There's something still waiting." I woke before dawn. The dream clung to me like smoke. For the first time in months, I felt something I hadn't dared to. Curiosity. What was still waiting? Why had Scout come back now? And what did the ring truly mean? As if the house had been listening, I heard a new sound, faint, coming from the basement. A muffled scrape, like something heavy shifting against the concrete. I froze in the hallway. The ring began to hum again, stronger this time, pulling my attention downward, toward the narrow door beside the kitchen, the one Daniel used to call the bones of the house. I found a flashlight, but before I opened the door, I said aloud, "If this is you, Scout, I'm coming." Saying it out loud steadied me. The air in the basement was colder, old with secrets. Dust floated in the beam of my light like drifting ash. Each step creaked beneath my feet, and I could feel the pull of the ring guiding me deeper. When I reached the far wall, I saw it. A faint, uneven crack curving near the floor, filled with dark soil that didn't belong in a basement. I knelt, brushing it with my hand, and a chill rippled through me. The soil was fresh, and there, just above the crack, was a small, perfect paw print pressed into the dust. I don't know why, but I whispered, "Show me." The hum in the ring stopped. The air grew still. And then, slowly, gently, the sound came, scratching from inside the wall. Soft at first, then steady, patient. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it echo. I pressed my palm against the boards and the scratching stopped, replaced by something else. A faint thump, rhythmic like a heartbeat buried deep in wood. And then a voice, Daniel's, low and quiet. Not from the wall, but from somewhere inside me. He found what I couldn't. I sat back, trembling. The flashlight flickered once, then steadied. My gaze followed the line of the crack again, and I saw that something glimmered within it, just barely, like glass catching moonlight. I reached into the gap and pulled out a small object covered in dirt. When I brushed it clean, it revealed itself, a tiny brass key. Old, worn, but still strong. I didn't recognize it, but I knew somehow that it belonged here. I went back upstairs, the key clutched in my hand, the ring warm against my skin. The house was silent now, waiting. I didn't know what the key opened, but I had the feeling that once I found out, nothing would be the same again. That night, I left the key on the kitchen table beside the candle. I whispered, "If this is what you wanted me to find, show me what it opens." And for the first time since Daniel died, I slept without dreaming. Morning arrived gray and indecisive, the kind of light that doesn't commit to being day. I woke with the key still on the table, catching what little sun there was like it wanted to be noticed. The ring hummed faintly again, almost purring. I wrapped the key in a tissue, as if that could soften its mystery, and slipped it into my pocket. The whole day felt watchful. I kept catching myself glancing toward the hallway where the basement door waited, calm and certain. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like a whisper. Every flicker of shadow seemed to point downward. By evening, I gave in. I carried the candle again. Silly, I know. But flashlights make a different kind of light. A nervous one. The flame was steadier, kinder. The basement steps seemed to sigh as I descended. At the bottom, I stood still and listened. For a long moment, there was nothing. Then the faintest sound, a single tap like a tail hitting wood once in greeting. I whispered, "Scout." The ring flared warm against my skin. The air moved, brushing past my cheek as if something invisible had just walked by. I turned toward the old cupboard Daniel used to keep his tools in. Its handle was a tarnished brass, old too, the same color as the key. My fingers shook as I pulled the key from my pocket. It fit, not perfectly, but enough to tell me it belonged. I turned it once, twice, and the latch released with a sigh so old it sounded almost human. Inside was dust, the scent of metal, and a small wooden box no larger than a loaf of bread. My breath stilled. The box was wrapped in a folded scrap of blue cloth, the same color as the bandana Scout used to wear on sunny days. I lifted it out gently and carried it upstairs back into the light. I unwrapped the cloth slowly. Inside, nestled like a secret, lay a stack of envelopes bound with twine. The top one had my name on it, my full name, written in Daniel's hand. I sat at the kitchen table and just stared for a while, afraid to open it. The ink had bled a little, as if touched by rain long ago. Finally, I broke the twine. There were 7 letters in total, each dated weeks before the accident. The first was short. "If you ever find this, it means the house has decided you're ready. Started digging in the basement to repair a leak and found something I can't explain. Scout won't go near it. He just stands there staring at the wall and whining. I thought it was a burrow. It's not, it's something else. I think the people who lived here before us buried something. I don't want to scare you, but promise me you won't go down there alone." I could feel my heartbeat everywhere, in my throat, in my ears, even in the weight of the ring. I kept reading. The next letter was written a week later. The tone had changed, uneasy, hesitant. The wall's been shifting. I hear it sometimes at night, like someone dragging nails softly along the wood. Scout doesn't bark anymore. He just lies by the door and listens. When I touch the wall, I can feel warmth, like something breathing behind it. I think I found an old key hidden under one of the boards, but it doesn't fit anything in the house. I've put it in the toolbox for now. The third letter stopped me cold. I saw her last night, in the hallway. She was standing by the door, the woman from the old photograph in the attic, the one with the hounds. She didn't look at me, just knelt and called a name, not mine. "Dogs." She said Pippin, and then she was gone. When I checked the door in the morning, there were paw prints in the dust. I don't think she ever left this house. I couldn't read the rest right away. My vision had gone blurry. The air felt too small for my lungs. The house creaked softly, the way it does before a storm. The candle's flame leaned toward the hallway, flickering, as if something unseen had just passed through. I thought of the letter's last line, of the name Daniel said the woman had whispered. Pippin, the dog from the photograph in the historical archives. The one that returns what is owed. My hands were shaking when I picked up the 4th letter. If anything happens to me, listen to Scout. He knows. The ring, it's connected somehow. When I held it near the wall, the sound stopped. I think it's a promise that was never kept. I think Pippin's spirit stayed to finish something. And if I can't, the rest of the page was torn away. I sat there for hours, The letters spread before me like a map of unfinished love and half-buried truth. The key sat beside them, still smeared with soil. The ring pulsed faintly, as if waiting for me to decide whether to end this or see it through. When the clock struck midnight, the scratching began again. But this time, it wasn't at the front door. It came from under the floor. The sound was slow and deliberate, not frantic, not threatening, just steady, like something working its way toward daylight. The floorboards beneath my feet trembled slightly, enough to ripple the candle's flame. I stood in the kitchen barefoot, every nerve listening. The scratching moved beneath the tiles, pausing now and then as if waiting for me to follow. I whispered, "Scout?" And the sound answered, one single tap like the thump of a tail against wood. I knelt, pressing my ear to the cool floor. The scratching grew louder. It was beneath the house now, close to where the basement wall curved inward. The ring burned suddenly against my skin, hot enough to make me gasp. I didn't think. I just moved. Through the hall, down the stairs, the candle shaking in my hand. The basement door creaked open with a sound like an old sigh, and the air met me cold and damp, thick with the smell of earth. The scratching stopped the moment my feet touched the last step. Then came another sound, something small falling onto the concrete, a metallic clink that echoed like a question. I followed it to the far corner where Daniel had once kept his workbench. The flashlight beam caught it first. A nail had dropped from the wall, and behind it, the faint outline of a square panel I'd never noticed before. The edges were uneven, sealed with a thin crust of dirt. I pulled at it, fingers slipping. The wood gave way with a brittle crack. Behind it, darkness. And in that darkness, movement, not large but unmistakable. A slow stir of air, like something exhaling after being asleep for too long. I lifted the candle close, heart pounding, and saw the soil pulse once. A shape rose slightly beneath it, fur pale and matted with dust. My breath caught. Paw, but not Scout's. It was smaller, thinner, the fur faded to near white. The paw rested on something half-buried beneath it, a small locket, tarnished but still intact. I reached out with trembling fingers and picked it up. The chain broke easily in my hand. The clasp rusted from years of silence. Inside the locket was a photograph, sepia, faded. A woman in a long coat kneeling beside a dog with one paw raised. On the back, written in that same tight script from Daniel's letters, were the words, "He returns what is owed." I sat back on the floor, the earth beneath me still trembling faintly, as if a heartbeat ran through it. The paw shifted once more and then, impossibly, began to dissolve, turning to dust, to smoke, to nothing. The locket grew warm in my palm, and from somewhere deep in the ground I heard a low, contented sigh. The air around me changed, softening, and then, clear as if whispered beside my ear, Daniel's voice again. He was never lost. He was waiting for you to forgive yourself. I pressed the locket to my chest and sobbed until the candle burned down to its last flicker. When I finally looked up, the paw print in the soil was gone. The earth was smooth again. The wall, still open, revealed nothing but quiet. I don't remember going back upstairs. I only remember the stillness of the house when I woke hours later, the gray light of dawn stretching across the floor, and the ring cool and steady on my hand again. No longer humming, no longer burning. Just there, peaceful. I made tea, opened every window, let the wind move through the rooms. The letters, the key, the locket. I placed them all in a small box and set it on the porch beside the maple tree. For the first time, the house didn't feel haunted. It felt full, whole. But that night, just as sleep began to pull me under, I heard it again. Not scratching this time. Just a single, gentle sound. The click of claws crossing the floorboards in the hallway, steady, familiar, unhurried. And then, a soft sigh at the foot of the bed. I didn't open my eyes. I didn't need to. I knew he was there, lying where he used to, keeping watch. Morning sunlight poured through the window, warm and golden, the way it used to when all three of us were still here. For a long moment, I didn't move. The air held that strange hush that lingers after something sacred has passed through. I could still feel the warmth at the foot of the bed where Scout had lain, as if the sheets themselves remembered him. The ring was cool now, calm, resting easily on my finger as though its work was done. I walked through the house barefoot, letting the light find the corners that had been dark for too long. Everything felt lighter. Even the walls, once swollen with sorrow, seemed to exhale. The house wasn't keeping secrets anymore. It was breathing with me again. I opened the front door, and for the first time, it didn't creak, it sang. On the porch, the box I'd left the night before sat undisturbed, except for one small thing, the blue bandana folded neatly on top. It fluttered once in the morning breeze like a hand waving goodbye. I smiled through tears. That afternoon, I went to the maple and buried the locket beneath its roots. The soil was soft, rich with rain, and when I pressed the earth closed, I felt something move, not beneath my hand, but within it, as if every loss I'd ever carried had settled into something kind, something forgiven. I whispered, "Thank you," and the wind answered, rustling the leaves above like applause. For days after, I kept expecting the house to fall quiet again, to go back to its old stillness. But it didn't. At night, when the wind slipped through the open windows, I sometimes caught faint sounds, the soft click of paws in the hallway, the echo of a laugh I hadn't heard in years. They never frightened me. They were reminders, gentle proof that love doesn't stop at the edge of breath. It just changes its shape. The ring remains on my finger. I never take it off now. It doesn't feel like a burden anymore, or a weight of promises broken. It feels like a heartbeat that learned how to keep time again. Sometimes, when the nights are heavy and the past tries to whisper too loudly, I sit by the door with the light off and my hand resting on the floorboards. I don't expect him to come back, not really. But every so often, when the hour is quiet enough and the world holds its breath, I feel it. The faintest pressure against my palm, a warmth, a sigh. And then, for just a second, a paw pressing back. And I know we're all still here. If this story moved you in any way, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below. It really helps.